live on Facebook now. So anyone who wants to share, please go on that IMEI thing and share it. You can go live on that also. बेटा तनुज को दे फोन जल्दी.
Yeah, sir, can we start?
Can you hear me? Hello.
सबसे पहले मेरा कोई भी अटेंड कर सकता है. यू भंडारकर का आया मेरे को आया. मैं तो भी ऐसे ही ध्यान रहा था तो ये भंडारकर वाला देखा तो मैंने लगा दिया.
Can you hear me, Rajesh?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Chalo, excellent. So 1, 2, 3 start. And now 13:30 we start or we start 13:35?
We start now, sir. We can just start. If we have our first session, all speakers, if we have, then we can start, sir.
Admit everyone, na? There are a lot of people waiting.
Yes, sir. Admit everyone.
I have disabled the waiting room now, so they'll come directly in now, sir.
Okay, sir. Great.
Okay, so Rajesh.
Okay, I'll start then, sir.
Yeah. Everybody is there? All speakers are there?
Well, I don't know. You need
Janine is there? I didn't see Janine.
Yes, she's already here, sir. I admitted Janine Nijjer inside.
and
Janine is there. Simon is there.
Already inside.
I need to make them as co-hosts. Please give me the names. I can see Jeff.
Yeah, he's co-host. Make him co-host. Hello, sir. Haji.
Okay.
Why? Sir, आपका कंप्यूटर में शेयर करो because आप सब बात कर रहा है इधर. All okay. Chaube Saab is there. Chaube is come.
Mehra sir, let me know when you have put all these speakers as co-hosts and I'll start.
Sir, you need to keep telling me. I can see 2 Satyas there. I don't know who they are.
Okay, 1 second.
I can see Subedar there. Yes. Hi, sir. How are you?
All well. All well.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate a lot. Yeah, I think all speakers are there. Okay.
Okay, I need to change his name. Please let me know.
Mehra sir, I think Gajanan sir has to be made co-host. Also, Simon Meyjes is joined, sir.
You can see Andrew there. Yeah.
Simon Meyjes to be made co-host.
Andrew. Chaube is there. Captain Ailio, how are you?
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
Hi, Captain Gajanan. I can hear now.
Yeah, my video has
नाम
stopped.
change करिए sir. नाम change करिए.
Rajesh, my video has stopped.
Dots on top and change your name, sir.
Okay.
I think we'll start, Rajesh.
Okay, I'll start, sir.
Rajesh, my video has stopped.
Okay, sir. I'll start. Can you see me now?
Sir, on the left hand side, you have a mute and a stop video. You'll see a line over the stop video. You just need to press that again.
No, is my video stopped right now?
Now it has. Okay.
Prakare sir, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you now.
Yes.
Okay.
I've done a mute all now. Please unmute yourself. Rajesh, please unmute yourself.
Done, sir. Done. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Basis wherever in the world you are tuning into this webinar and a very warm welcome to all our distinguished fraternity members and guests. Marine pilotage is as old as man's quest for trade. There are references to marine pilotage in biblical verses and also in epics like Homer's Iliad. In fact, those in the know understand that had it not been for a Kutchi pilot, Kanji Malam, piloting Vasco da Gama from Kalindi or modern-day Kenya to Calicut, the sea route for the Europeans to India would have remained a mystery for many more years to come. Marine pilotage is in today's world an essential service to maintain society's supply lines, and as with every professional service, constantly updating and upgrading is necessary to maintain the contemporary edge. The All India Marine Pilots Association has taken it upon itself to bring you the first webinar in India and possibly the world dedicated solely to the world of the maritime pilot. Welcome to Reconceptualization of Indian Maritime Pilotage, a webinar on Indian pilotage. This program is also being live streamed on the YouTube channel and Facebook page of AIMPA, as well as the Institute of Marine Engineers India, Mumbai. Our media partners, Marix and Bhandaka Publications, join us in this live streaming. May I now have the do's and don'ts slide, please, Gajanan sir?
Sanjeev has a slide.
Okay.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, do it.
The do's and don'ts slide, please.
Okay, okay.
For maintaining the decorum and smooth flow, may I request the below from all the guests. Your audio is muted and the video is off. Please set your video settings to hide non-video participants. Kindly do not put your audio mic on. Direct your questions and queries to the participant marked as question from within the chat box. We need this so later on pick out the correct person to address your query. The phone number given you can contact for any further assistance. Thank you. Thank you, Meyjes sir. I now request Captain Gajanan Karanjikar, Founder President AIMPA, to kindly proceed with the introduction of the webinar theme and objectives. Captain Karanjikar is a master mariner with 30 years of diversified experience in shipping business and related operations. He wears many hats. He is a multimodal transport expert, Founder President All India Marine Pilot Association, Head Coastal Shipping Sikka Logistics Limited, and the founder Maritime Fraternity Group, a think tank for shipping. He is also a prolific writer in marine subjects. It is a privilege to hear from you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Welcome all to this first ever webinar of AIMPA. I welcome all participants. We have registered participants, more than 500 for this webinar. And I'm really overwhelmed to see the people gathered here, all esteemed crowd, as well as the esteemed members of the Maritime Fraternity Group and people who are very active in their individual fields, caring about pilotage, caring about marine pilots. Yes, this is a unique webinar because this is about maritime pilotage, a subject which is niche and which has been addressed and addressed to very few so far. This is the first attempt to have a maritime pilotage webinar in India. The idea of this webinar came through the discussions with one of the speakers and of course moderators here of Capt.Ravi Nijjer and Simon. We were discussing about the Indian pilotage and what can be done in Indian pilotage. And there was so much lot to learn from those discussions that I was all the time thinking of as if, you know, if I could talk to the crowd, if we all could talk to the crowd and make some kind of a take home for the Indian maritime pilotage to reconceptualize the entire thing into a much broader spectrum and coming out of those old laws that India's maritime pilotage and maritime sector is being governed at this point in time. This webinar is also unique because this is the first webinar of AIMPA, and more than that, it's about the subject which is very close to the heart of AIMPA. The AIMPA's inception happened in thought process in July 2019, when we lost a pilot in Mumbai, Captain VK Gupta, and that sole incident accelerated the formation of AIMPA, which was only in thoughts earlier, became on paper, came on solidarity of support of pilots. And of course, it was a pleasure doing that because it was about safety and security. And that sole thing became a motto of AIMPA. Instead of starting with memberships and life memberships and founder memberships and things like that, AIMPA went straight into the ground field, started working for the pilots. COVID happened in between when we were flourishing our circles to the pilots, and of course we negotiated for the COVID insurance for pilots and things like that. But then this was the first organization in India striving to be on the pan-India level. And I must thank all the fraternity whomever I spoke to in industry, be it FOSMA, be it MASA, be it CMI, be it Nautical Institute, all the organizations in India, they all supported the venture very much. They all said to me, yes, this needs to be done. And I'm really thankful to them today. Because today I could do this because of their backup, their patting on my back to do it. Immediately, AIMPA's government council was formed. And of course, the logo and things took place. And we immediately embarked on a pilot ladder mission. This mission has been going on for last almost 6-7 months in AIMPA. We've been talking to MTIs, we've been talking to the ship managers. We also took it to the Digi shipping for the focus campaign. We took it to the MOUs for our consolidated inspection campaigns. And it was all the time success because people were also very concerned about pilots' life. It was the trainings were taken very well by the MTIs and the ship managers. And today's seminar also is based on main 3 topics. These 3 topics are pilot ladder, pilot transfer procedures, and pilot training. And you would appreciate and notice that all these 3 topics, they culminate to the safety of navigation in ports. And this is what the AIMPA's portfolio is. That we care about safety of navigation in port and all harborfront matters that happen in Indian port. We have 2 sessions in this seminar. First session is about pilot ladder and pilot transfer procedures. Second is about pilot training. And we have very eminent speakers. On the very first session, we have, Captain, I won't go with particular order as such, of what is given in the pamphlet or the flyer. But, in order of the liking of the subject, the passion given by the speakers to the subjects is enormous. That's what I said, it's a treat to hear them today. And there'll be so much to take home for AIMPA, for India, and for Indian Maritime Pilotage today, that it will be a history. It will really create a history. Jane Drummond, Captain, she is a harbour master of Newcastle Port. Of course, Rajesh will introduce them one by one in the full biodata. But, she has done enormous work with respect to pilot transfer procedures in Newcastle Harbour. We have Simon Meyjes, who was the ex-CEO of Reef Pilot Association in Australia, has done revolutionary work in writing safety management procedures and safety management manuals for pilot operations. We have Captain Chaube from Adani Ports.
Hello.
Who has been a pilot in various ports in India and has lot to contribute. We have a sailing master on the first session. The need was felt particularly because to hear the other side of the story as well. When I went to MTIs for training, we always told them, you guys must have not seen the pilot ladder, how it looks from the shore. And here is the pilot who's giving you that view. And for this kind of seminars, we require to hear as to what sailing master perceives of all these policies and all these things, all the things what we discuss ashore. We have a second session very well will be done by, Jeff Parfitt, who's the director of operations of Chirp Maritime UK. Chirp has huge followings and Chirp's work is very well known in the world. I'm no one to introduce them as such, but Jeff certainly agreed to take part in this, to take the incidences learning ahead to pilot training. Andrew Bisley, you know, I mean, Grizzlies are another iconic figures in Australia. They have started on their own the man scale model training for pilots, which is the future about the simulators. And he is here today introducing about the advantages over the man scale model over the simulators and other conventional trainings of pilot. Captain Karkare, of course, everyone knows him, I'm sure, in India for his contribution to the Maritime Fraternity and ports and pilotage. He's going to speak on the benchmarking of the pilot training in India and abroad. And of course, we have again Simon Meyjes. He's going to speak on a very particular subject which we discussed between myself, Ravi, and Simon in our earlier meetings about a human factor that undergoes in pilotage and pilot-related accidents. We never think about this, and that is when rather I felt the need that all the pilots and pilot-related people in India must hear, you know, what Australia has done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel again in India. We can learn from somebody who has been there, done that. And Australia has gone through the entire same phase as ours 30 years back, as I hear from Ravi, Captain Ravi, of course, that when they started in 1988 with the revamping entire, you know, pilotage and pilot laws and pilotage acts, etc. It was really, you know, for me, for a person like me with so much of passion with maritime pilotage and to do something with the Maritime Fraternity, I felt really great to get that thing, you know, get those speakers here and start this webinar. I would welcome all again to join this webinar, and we have a certain follow-up after the webinar. We're not going to shut our computers down and sit tight after the webinar is over. With the help of course, Chirp, AIMEI, Nautical Institute, we're going to have a small committee after the webinar and put those take-homes for the Indian Maritime Pilotage on paper, take it to the National Shipping Board, Indian Port Association, and Ministry of Shipping for the betterment. It's going to be all broken down in action points and, you know, with the target dates, etc. We need your support. We need the fraternity support for this. And please feel free to ask any questions to the all stalwarts who want to speak for next 2 hours to you. I welcome you all again. Thank you for caring for pilots and maritime pilotage in India. Welcome all. Thank you, Rajesh. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, sir. It is now time for our first session of the event, Pilot Ladder Safety and Pilot Transfer. We have lined up a very distinguished panel for the discussion, and it is my honor to introduce the panel members. May I first welcome the moderator, Capt.Ravi Nijjer, Principal Consultant, Marine Consultancy Group Private Limited. Capt. Nijjer is a lead investigator in marine accidents. He has developed Advanced Maritime Pilotage course for Australian port pilots and BRM third generation course. He is a Principal Consultant, Marine Consultancy Group Private Limited. Next, we have Mr. Simon Meyjes, ex-CEO of Australian Reef Pilot Association, speaking on pilot ladder safety and transfer procedures. Simon was Chief Executive Officer of Australian Reef Pilots for 9 years until 2020. ARP employs more than 40 marine pilots engaged in both compulsory and non-compulsory ships pilotage in the Great Barrier Reef, Marine Park, and bulk ports in Queensland, Northern Territory, and New Zealand. ARP's motto, Guardians of the Reef, has its roots more than 140 years ago when pilotage of square-rigged sailing ships through the treacherous Torres Strait was pioneered. Next member on the panel, Captain Sansar Chandra Chaube, ex-pilot at JNPT, MBPT, Mundra, and presently Vice President at Adani Ports, speaking on pilot code and boat pilot perspective. Captain Chaube started career with Century Shipping as a deck cadet in 1991. He has sailed with Century Shipping, Eurasia, and Shipping Corporation of India. He got command in 2004 and thereafter quit sailing for a career in pilotage operations. Captain Chaube has many firsts to his name. He piloted the first 300 and 336 meters container vessel to call Mundra Port. He has piloted the first fully laden Cape-size vessel to the newly commissioned West Basin Coal Terminal. He has also piloted the first 366 meters and the first 14,000 TEU vessel to call at any Indian port. He was awarded the National Marine Environment Protection Certificate by the Indian Coast Guard for being the first responder and leading the firefighting effort for extinguishing fire on board MT Janessa at Kandla Port Anchorage. Next on the panel, we have Captain Jeanine Drummond, Harbour Master for the ports of Newcastle and Yamba in New South Wales, Australia, speaking on pilot transfer initiatives that are a must for a port. Jeanine is an experienced master mariner and maritime professional, having successfully delivered safe and efficient port operations, including marine pilotage, DTS, ship scheduling, emergency response, and pollution prevention, pilotage transfer, operational audits, marine pollution prosecution, incident reporting, and investigation, as well as planning and compliance across Australian ports. Jeanine is passionate about using new technologies and shared learnings to continually improve best practices for our maritime and port sector, as well as being a strong advocate for improvement across all levels for diversity and inclusion in our maritime industry. Next, we have a sailing master, Captain Santosh Rangan, sailing with Fleet Management Hong Kong, sharing his thoughts on master's perspective on master pilot exchange and pilot transfer. Captain Rangan has been a tanker master from end of 2016 on various types of tankers, in particular chemical tankers, and it would add a very relevant and contemporary perspective to hear from a sailing master and the challenges encountered. I now request our esteemed moderator, Capt.Ravi Nijjer sir, to kindly introduce the topic and set the tone. Over to you, sir.
Okay, I'm unmuted. All right, I'll just say good day all in Australia. We say that covers good afternoon, good morning, and all the others. I'm very pleased to be invited to be a moderator at this inaugural event of the All India Marine Pilots Association webinar, Reconceptualizing Indian Marine Pilotage, Maritime Pilotage, sorry. I've been swept along, like most here, by the infectious energy and enthusiasm of Captain Karanjikar. The role of the pilots is crucial in port operations. A port can operate without a CEO for longer than it can in the absence of pilots. A pilot is a very high-value person in the port community. Most are not aware of the risks taken daily by pilots in carrying out their tasks. Even pilots don't like to think too much about the risks. Until fairly recently, multiple hazards in pilot transfer have been glossed over. This webinar is a serious attempt to put the spotlight on the multiple hazards in pilot transfer operations and find ways of reducing the risk. There is much more to safety in pilot transfer than just pilot ladders. For example, just today I learned that a pilot boarded the pilot ladder while still clipped to the pilot boat. There are issues relating to physical and mental fitness, grip strength, personal protective equipment, pilot boat and crew standards, etc. A panel of experts, each with their unique expertise, have been assembled to present their informed viewpoints on the issues that need to be addressed to improve safety in pilot transfers. In order of presentations, Simon Meyjes. I worked with Simon for 2 years in developing an SMS for the unique risks in pilotage operations. A considerable amount of time was spent on the pilot transfer operations. We even delved into the psychology of the pilot. Most pilots consider the pilot transfer the temporary inconvenience to get to their proper workplace. And I consider Simon to be an absolute encyclopedia on the subject of pilot transfer operations. He's done a study in depth. Then we have Captain Jeanine Drummond, and a pilot fell from a pilot ladder and very badly injured in Newcastle. As a response to this injury, Captain Drummond examined the pilot transfer operation in a very comprehensive manner and has come up with improvements at many levels. Under Janine's supervision, a video has been produced that has the potential to set the standard for pilot transfers. Then we have Captain Sansar Chand Chobe. He's an ex-pilot, and I can see he's a person with a very enterprising brain, because he's an ex-pilot. He's come up with a very unique and innovative solution to pilot transfer operations by using a tug. So we're very interested to hear that. And what I found very interesting when I was speaking to him the other day is that the pilots like that. That's very important, that the pilots are comfortable with that. And then last of all, we have Captain Santosh Rangan, and he's a ship's captain, and we'd like to hear his view about these very pesky and demanding pilots and what he has to do on the ship to satisfy them. All right, we'll start with Simon Meyjes as the first presenter. Simon?
Thank you very much, Ravi, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. And I wonder if I can share my screen now. Is that visible to everybody at the moment?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Is that now visible?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just a very brief introduction, because we're all very time limited. I don't intend to actually delve into the minutiae or the mechanics of the problems with pilot transfer. What I'd like to do is introduce some fairly high-level concepts and describe what I think is the workflow that needs to be undertaken by any port or organisation to actually develop safe means of work. And so I'll hop straight into it and try and leave as much time at the end of this for any questions. So I've listed my objective. I've listed the objective here as the prevention of personnel injuries and damage to port assets during pilot transfer operations. And this little flow diagram here is something that I've actually called up from human performance training, which I'll be talking to a little bit later on. But this diagram describes something which is very personal and pilot-centric, noting that this symposium is addressed to pilots, but pilots are in the middle of a system, and that system comprises people, programs, processes, the work environment, the wider organisation, and the equipment. And I think it's very important to understand the holistic nature of this. Ravi has alluded to the fact that the pilot ladder is just one element of this, but this is an end-to-end process that, in my view, starts in the office and finishes in the office. And there are many steps and links along the way which we all have to come to understand. Conceptually, safety is a system property, not a component property. The component that we're talking about being pilot ladders, but the pilot ladders are part of a system. It must be dealt with at a system level, not a component level. Just like to hark back to the outcome of the Piper Alpha investigation. Lord Cullen actually came up with a recommendation which has since been implemented in the offshore industry, but never really comprehensively in the shipping industry. I won't read this, but I'll just leave it here for a few minutes. But essentially, the safety case is a framework which describes how work must be done to deliver safe outcomes for all personnel involved. The safety case framework was the framework that we selected at Australian Reef Pilots for our overall SMS, and it was most certainly the framework that we selected for developing safe pilot transfer procedures. As I said, the pilot ladder is just one component of a holistic pilot transfer operational system, but there are many other elements. The pilot vessels and its associated equipment, the pilot vessel crew, the ship's crew, the shoreside personnel and the organisation behind it. And I'm sure Janine will be talking about that as well. The marine environmental factors impacting the operation, port infrastructure, the regulatory environment, and the procedures which are documented to describe the safety case and how that safety case is implemented. It's a fairly brief list. I'm sure there is a lot more. And the feedback that we get from this webinar will be very important to flesh all of these issues out. One thing that we thought was particularly important when we developed our safety case was that we understood that it is very case specific and organisation specific. It's not a one size fits all. For example, if you talk about marine environment, some ports operate in some very hazardous offshore conditions, and in Australia I'm certainly aware of places like Port Phillip where there's a very wild bar which has claimed lives in the past. There's Columbia River Bar in the United States. And I'm sure there are other places in India which are equally as hazardous. So each safety case has to be developed based on a process of hazard identification at each port. That's one of the underlying principles of the safety case, is that it's a proactive approach to safety which requires all of the hazards to be identified in advance. So, and the way we did this was through extensive workshops and seminars and research about other incidents from our local environment, from around Australia, from around the world, in fact, and even reaching out into other industries, other hazardous industries, such as, for example, road transport, aviation, even the medical industry. And I've come up with a pretty brief list here of some of the hazards that we identified. So the personal embarkation and disembarkation at the port. We had quite a few accidents with persons getting on and off the pilot boat at wharves and jetties and other types of port infrastructure. And that's a really important issue. And in fact, we'd had some fairly serious injuries in that part of the operation. Personnel motions during the pilot vessel voyage. Impact on the human body is a very well-known health hazard. The US Coast Guard and the US Navy has done a lot of work around this, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Consideration about heavy weather operations, particularly relevant to you guys in India during the monsoon season, which we also share similar conditions. Pilot vessel design, issues like handling, seaworthiness, maintenance, those types of things. Operating in poor visibility, particularly sea fog. Inadequate nav aids. Traffic scheduling and fatigue management, and all of the commercial pressures to get a pilot on and off a ship when the ship wants a pilot. That's an incredibly important issue. The lack of personnel training right across organisations, and it's not only in our pilotage organisations, but it's on board ships, it's ashore in the port organisations, it's across our industry. Unfitness for duty, and that is of particular relevance to pilots when they encounter the pilot ladder task, but it's also relevant to boat operational crew, managers and all other people in our industry. And then, of course, the not-so-elephant in the room, this big issue of non-compliant pilot ladders, which I guess triggered this webinar. So some of the key requirements to improve the safety of pilot transfer, and again, this is a pretty brief list, there's a lot more to it, but safe means of personnel access at the port, including in the case of medical evacuation. And again, I'm sure Janine can add to this, but it's very, very important that not only under normal conditions that be safe, but under abnormal emergency conditions. So evacuating injured personnel from vessels returning from sea to the port can be a lifesaver. Optimising vessel design to minimise accelerations, reducing impacts on the human body, and all of the work that I have read about this, it's an incredibly important issue. The continual impacts that the human body is subjected to during the course of professional careers is life-shortening. Spinal injuries, all sorts of joint conditions, and the long-term effects of that sort of exposure. It's life-shortening, but even during life, it really can present very restrictive conditions on people. And I've got some very, very close friends and colleagues who have suffered from this. So I can't overemphasize the importance of that from a design point of view and an engineering point of view.
Simon?
Yes.
2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay. There are a whole bunch of other issues there, and this PowerPoint will, I'm sure, be left and posted on the website for people to reflect on. And I think that each issue needs a separate workspace developed around it and bodies of experts to make contributions and procedures written. The issue of non-compliant ladders, the most effective measure that I've been identified is quite simply saying no. And that comes down to you guys, the pilots. When presented with a non-compliant ladder, it is within your power to simply refuse to board that ladder until it's rectified. There are ports in Australia where that is the norm. And I'd say that Port Kembla Port would have been the leader in that field. There have been a few pilots who led that charge, and just that simple word no has been a game changer in our industry in Australia. It's very, very difficult in a commercial environment to do that. And the people who say no need support within their organisation all the way to CEO and board level. And to me, that's the most important thing. Say no. But there are those other issues there, and a lot of it comes down to training, communication. And on a final note, in my research, I've discovered that there have actually been more serious injuries and deaths to ship crew in rigging pilot ladders than there have been to marine pilots in boarding or disembarking. And to me, that's also a very, very serious issue. So this is industry-wide. It's not just about pilots. It's about all maritime personnel involved in this very tricky task. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Simon. All right, Janine, could you please do the next presentation?
Okay, Ravi, you're going to have to keep me on track for time. I'm just
Okay,
going to try and share my screen now, okay?
Okay, I'll do that.
When it shows up.
Okay. I think they'll have to invite you later on to do a full webinar for what you've got.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is my PowerPoint showing up now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are you seeing it in presentation mode or speaker mode?
In both.
In both, is it?
Yeah.
We're seeing your speaker notes, Janine.
What about now?
Now we are right. Thank you.
Now? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll get started. Thank you, Ravi, and thank you all Indian Marine Pilots Association for inviting me to share my recent experiences with improving safety initiatives regarding marine pilot vessel transfer. I'll just quickly show you some background on the port where I do work and where many of you probably had occasion to visit over the years.
Newcastle is the largest port by tonnage on the Australian east coast. Marine pilots from the Port Authority of New South Wales handling close to 5,000 shipping movements every year. Helicopters are used for the bulk of pilot transfer operations in and out of Newcastle. 80% of all transfers are via chopper, the remaining 20% by pilot cutter. Built in 2011, the pilot cutter is a state-of-the-art 16.8 metre Camargue design.
So I'm not going to take a lot of time to discuss the details of pilot ladder design, rigging or compliance because they're very important issues and they can be better articulated with other experts on these panels. I will, however, focus on why the continual improvement and sharing of lessons regarding pilot vessel transfer is very important to every marine pilot, vessel master operator, pilotage operator and port regulator around the world. Sadly, it all too often takes a significant incident for real lessons to be learned, shared and improvements actualised. Far too many people have lost their life or been badly injured so that others can learn from their lessons. 2 years ago, I experienced one of those moments where for years our good standing practices and procedures have served us well and yet had to take stock of everything we thought we knew about marine pilot transfer after one of our very experienced pilot team members was badly injured and lucky to be alive after a fall from the pilot ladder. The fall occurred at the very critical moment, as many of you can appreciate, during the pilot transfer, where the weight between the pilot vessel deck and the ladder, with 1 foot between the two for that split second, and it only takes the boat to drop away suddenly and unexpectedly in the swell to test the upper body strength to hold that ladder. And unfortunately, with the shock loading being experienced on this pilot's arms, he had no choice but to let go the ladder, hoping to land on the pilot vessel deck below. However, the deck did continue to fall into the trough of the wave, and to him it felt like an eternity before he landed heavily and awkwardly on that deck, knowing he was badly injured.
Sorry to interrupt you, Janine. The screen is only half. The presentation is not being seen fully. Please, could you have a look at
that? The slides are only half seen. Huh? Janine,
oh, okay. Let me see what I can do for that. That might show the presenter notes though.
Yes, but we can see your this thing as well, your notes as well. So there is a way to, otherwise it's fine. I mean, as long as people can see, because
half the slides might be better because I'll try and get the video to work later on. Okay.
Yeah, but this is only a half slide.
Or is it too annoying?
Okay, this happens when you have two screens. It's okay. Just go on the presentation mode and you continue.
Okay. Instead today...
Swap your screen.
The other one?
Swap your screen.
This one?
Yeah, this. Yeah, okay. Just continue. That's all right.
Okay. How's it?
Yeah.
Okay. So instead today, I intend to leave you with the associated learnings, not just sparked from this particular incident, but from all the incident reports we review, as well as our own initiatives for continual improvement and reassessing how we do what we do and why we do it the way we do it. I hope that this leaves you all to consider how you may use some of this knowledge to reassess your own operations and continually improve the best practices for this safety critical work around the world. The medical attention and recovery of the pilot in that particular incident was priority, but right alongside that was the importance of launching an immediate ICAM, an incident control analysis method. The method adopts the holistic, systematic safety investigation principle, identifying both local factors and failures within the broader organisation that contributed to the incident. Such things as communication, training, operating procedures, incompatible goals, change management, organisational culture and equipment. Through the analysis of this information, we were able to identify what really went wrong and to make the necessary recommendations for remedial actions to reduce risk and build error-tolerant defences against future incidents. This took us right back to the process of how to eliminate the risk. And since the act of pilotage is compulsory and essential, we must continue to transfer marine pilots to vessel. And we had in our port introduced helicopter operations 20 years ago for this very reason. Yet when vessels are unsuitable for helicopter or the helicopter cannot fly, we must use pilot vessel and further investigator possibilities regarding restraint or arrestor systems that could be used in pilot ladder climbing, and found both in Australia and overseas that there is still nothing suitable for this purpose. Without elimination, we are left with ensuring we have robust processes, training and methods to effectively and safely reduce these hazards. While we have increased safety prevention measures for many years and incorporated this into pilot PPE, operations and vessel design, such things as tethering on deck, persons overboard recovery systems, auto-inflating life jackets with self-activating AIS satellite positioning devices, and good procedures for checking pilot ladder compliance. Yet when taking this holistic, systematic review, we were able to learn so much more. We looked at our operation in two aspects. What are our risk mitigators that are preventing things going wrong in pilot transfer? And separately, in the unlikely event that things don't go to plan, we consider the appropriate responsive mitigators, such as enough training, equipment, and process to be able to have the best possible outcome in those unfortunate events. We reviewed and updated procedures to ensure adopting best practices and consulted widely, collaborating internally with our other ports and that externally of other pilotage service providers. And we want to thank Simon Meyjes for that excellent support that he gave us at that time. We immediately adopted a formalised traffic light system for go or no go in marginal conditions or at any other time deemed necessary. We constantly reviewed our weather data against operational requirements such as small loaded vessels or large ballasted capesize so as to identify our upper limit conditions for each vessel, as well as green, always okay, yellow needs additional dynamic risk assessment to proceed, and the red of no go. We operate in very challenging conditions with opposing swell and weather, and we need to train our pilots and pilot vessel crews to be empowered to say no when it is not safe to transfer. We reduced review of our high risk activities to no more than 12 months, and we encourage and expect external experts to assist us with that review. Throughout this process over the last 2 years, we've brought together pilot representatives and managers, people from across our ports, and brought in external expertise to assist with workshops to review our current process for the pilot ladder training, marine pilot health standards, PPE, and checked what we were doing was going well and identified where we can continue to improve. We found that there was improvements to be made in footwear for non-slip SRC rating and glove design. Our medical practitioners, along with an exercise physiologist, contributed to reviewing health standards so as to ensure functional health assessments match the task required. They also identified best techniques for ladder climbing, disembarking that minimise injury to pilots over many years of doing this task. We've developed video material to assist authorised medical health.
2 minutes.
How many, Ravi?
2 minutes, I said.
Okay, oh my God, not long. Okay, quick. And that's going to be included in the next review. I'm just going to skip a couple of slides. So you can see here our responsive measures included looking at the deck where we fall, removing obstructions and protection by putting in foam. We also considered our pilotage medical equipment on board to be able to deal with an emergency, and the training that was required by our crews and marine pilots to deal with trauma when offshore. We've also looked at rubber decking to be able to go on future pilot vessels because they need to be incorporated from design. We made hard hat wearing, issued head protection to all of our marine pilots. In this video, you'll be able to see how we conducted real live tests with our life jackets to ensure that the marine helmets were appropriate for the use and did not create any other injuries to someone. And the important bit is we've taken all of this information and turned it into an online training package. Unfortunately, I can't share that with you because it's not stabilized on a website yet, but I've been able to take some screenshots of what it contains. And so we have a system of training now for new pilots and refresher for current pilots. where it's a combination of e-learning, interactive e-learning online, and then our on-water climbing in our shed, and then also on water. So I'll just step through a few of these slides with you if you can see them. You'll be able to see different aspects. Part of our training is also to ensure reporting of defective pilot ladders, so that either through the AIMPA app with our national regulator or through our internal marine reporting, we can follow up with vessel masters and operators to improve pilot ladder defects for the next time those ships may call. You'll also see in the training package, it goes through the required climbing technique, the fitness for work, PPE, the ladder access, embarking and disembarking, and the different types of ladders. So we also train in what a compliant ladder should look like. We train in all aspects of our PFD for the personal locating beacon, how to manually inflate, and the other essential equipment that the life jacket carries. You'll see on this picture here with the ladder, the little circles indicate the interactive aspects of the training where we click on that to learn. The form on the left is our internal training that steps through what new pilots need to be deemed competent in our training elements. You'll see a few more screenshots here from the training video. It's an interactive online platform, so it's not essentially a video you sit and watch, you interact with it. And then you take that knowledge of our procedures, our process, our equipment, and you put it into practice on the water in a staged approach, so that you start with observing the pilot transfer first, and then you slowly increase to short ladder climbs, and then to nighttime full weather cape size climbs by the time you're finished. And it would be remiss of me not to pop this last slide up from our very experienced pilot Malcolm, who presented at the AIMPA conference here in Australia last year. And he said, pilots are required to transfer to and from ships at sea nearly every day of their career. Pilot transfer is extremely high risk and inherently dangerous, and sadly when it goes wrong, the consequences can and usually are devastating. Practice the highest ethos of safety culture and due diligence in your workplace. Be adaptive to change and adopt best practice. Review how you do things and learn from others' misfortune. And I hope one day you all have the opportunity for Malcolm to share his experiences.
We are planning to do that, Janine.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you for having me present tonight. And
Thank
I'll go through it a little bit slower next time.
you, Janine. Yeah. All right, let's have Captain Sansar Chand Chobe.
Hi, friends, colleagues, and seniors. A very good day to all of you. I'm a proud mariner and even prouder pilot. There are very few professions which give the joy what pilotage, marine pilotage gives to its practitioners. And a lot of topics which I had wanted to cover has already been covered by Simon and Janine. So what I'll do is I'll just go through my PPT a bit faster. Let me know once you can see the screen.
We can.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, now you can see a pilot boat going out, and I think most of the people who are sitting in office jobs must be thinking, why not we should be sitting there rather than sitting in an office job. The thrill of pilotage is so immense. There are certain factors which affect safe pilotage. A lot of points have been covered by Simon, like I said. The presentation that I'll be giving is basically totally from the pilot boat and the pilot crew's perspective. I've put myself in their shoe, how they think, how they feel. And please accept my apologies to all the master mariners, to all the pilots, if some of the issues highlighted may not be in agreement with the views held very dearly by some of you. These are the topics which are under consideration. Expectations of from the pilot boat and its crew, challenges with respect to vessels, challenges with respect to weather conditions, challenges with respect to the pilot boat design and the crew itself, the training. Simon and Janine both very beautifully, they have explained it. Challenges with respect to the pilot. This is a topic which is not usually discussed, but it has been hinted by Janine as well as Simon in their presentation. And finally, is there any room for improvement? So what are the expectations from the pilot boat and its crew? Being a port operator, Adani are the largest private port operator in the country. There are certain ports where we have pilot ports, and some of the ports where the distances are large or where we need a tug to go out and make fast very quickly. We have been using tugs for pilot boarding and disembarking. Even the ports where we have pilot boats, and when the weather is rough and it's not really comfortable going nearly 15 miles out into the sea in a pilot boat bobbing up and down. So in that cases, we use tug for pilot boarding and disembarking. Of course, it's very costly, nearly 3 times more costly from the operational point of view. But we have, in consultation with the management, we had taken decision that if the weather is bad, we'll use a tug rather than a pilot boat. Of course, our tugs are also designed in such a manner that they have that boarding area on the forecastle deck, sort of raised forecastle deck they have, so the pilot can easily board, and from there he can board the vessel. So some of the points, expectations from the pilot boat is they have to provide a safe, comfortable passage to the pilot, because the distance to pilot station can be half an hour or 1 hour, and bad weather, at least the place should be comfortable. Board, disembark the pilot on time. This, I think this is one of the key KPIs which is monitored. I think at other ports also it must be. This is, of course, as far as we are concerned, we monitor it on very closely. What was the time the pilot boarded, and what was the time pilot disembarked, whether it's from the seaside or from the shore side, because that helps us in reducing idling of the assets. And plus, we know that the customer satisfaction is also a very important KPI for us, and for us, getting the pilot on board right on dot is very important. Assist the pilot. The pilot board crew is expected to assist the pilot to disembark and safely board him onto the vessel, remain in touch with the control. And traffic is there, a lot of ports, you have a lot of fishing traffic and other things are there. So he has to keep a very sharp lookout. And then pilot boats, usually they do not follow the channel. They will be slightly out of the channel if it's a busy channel, so that they can, approach channel can be left free for main vessels. And one of the points is providing emergency response. It's a point often overlooked, but in case of an emergency, pilot falling on the deck of the pilot boat or falling into the water, they are the first responders. So certain amount of expertise is required from them. And of course, the final point is they should be very, very cost effective with respect to operation and maintenance. One of the points raised was challenges with respect to vessels. Vessels come in all shape and sizes. In this vessel, boarding a pilot, the boat gets underneath this obstruction and she will damage herself, especially if there's a sea and swell. Then how does the pilot get inside? Like Simon said, the best thing is to say no, because it is very difficult for the pilot boat crew to maneuver the pilot safely and get him on board such vessels. It is next to impossible. So what are the challenges with respect to the vessels? I think some of these are channel with limitations which are there. The vessels are unable to provide a lee. If you have got just a 300-meter channel and if you have to alter course by 15 degrees, you will be out of the channel in no time and you will run aground. So if the pilot is, unless until he is really going out to the sea, and which sometimes the final leg of the passage, the pilot disembarks, especially like I remember in Bombay Harbor, we used to disembark at the Sunk Rock during monsoon season because the pilot cannot disembark once he has crossed that point. So the master is unable to provide the lee because the sea is coming right from ahead, and even 5 or 10 degrees of alteration of course will not help. So there is no way the master can provide that lee. Then there are instances when there is incoming traffic. He cannot alter course or he'll run into the vessel. Even if he can provide the lee by altering 10 degrees, he will not do it. Then instances are there when the vessels are unable to reduce their speed. We have container vessels nowadays who have speed of 8.5, 9 knots, dead slow ahead. Speed is 9 knots. So the vessel is just running away. And if you stop the vessel, there's a beam on wind or current, she starts the course, losing her course. And the pilots, the master is tempted again to give the engine. So this high boarding disembarking speed is a huge challenge. And poor boarding disembarking arrangements, this has been discussed. I would just stress on the point of the pilot door, or a lot of pilots, they call it the trap door, basically. There are instances when if the vessel is loaded and the sea and swell is there, the pilot boat sometimes gets into that cavity and damages herself, or even for the pilot, it is very dangerous because as he has to jump into the pilot door. Communication is another issue. A lot of multinational crew, and you have some crew which are not really proficient in English, and it's not always possible for the pilot or the pilot boat crew to communicate to the vessel crew through the vessel master. Sometimes you need an immediate response, but the understanding of languages, and that becomes another challenge. Of course, then there is some of the challenges which has been discussed. These are with respect to the weather conditions. Head-on sea and swell, and this is, I think, one of the greatest risks which pilots they encounter during piloting operation. The primary reason is the sea and swell conditions. When the seas are very rough, it becomes very, very difficult boarding and disembarking. The decks, they become slippery. The relative motion of the boat with respect to the pilot ladder, just as the pilot is either disembarking or boarding, the boat may sway away from the ladder, and the pilot is left hanging on the pilot ladder. During rough weather, the pilot boat is usually unable to stay alongside, and even the crew, the pilot boat crew, to help the pilot reduces, because they have to take care of themselves rather than taking care of the pilot. With respect to the poor visibility, this is another major challenge. The crew which man the pilot boat are usually not highly qualified, and things have become better with AIS integrated radars and electronic charts. But then there are very few pilot boats which are equipped with such equipment, at least in India. And even if these equipments are there on board, there are not many people who know how to use it. The boat crew. Dense fog and rain again makes it very challenging for the pilot boat to understand, to safely board and disembark the pilot. Then there are challenges with respect to the pilot boat and its crew itself. And you can see the pilot boat here. Imagine the pilot falling from here. You have all these obstructions around. If he were to fall on any of these, he will break his back or he will hurt himself. And what are the options available? While boarding the pilot, maybe the pilot boat can just move back. But when the pilot is disembarking, he will have to be near the ladder. The boat cannot be away from the ladder. This is a risk which remains. There is a need for redesigning the pilot boat in such a manner that if the pilot were to fall on the deck, it can be cushioned. With respect to the pilot boats, basically the designs are poor. They are not standardized. Inadequate risk assessment with respect to structures on the boat. Then lack of cushioning material on the landing area. But like Janine said, they are working on something. I think a rubber deck or something would really help. Then the issues related to inadequate speed of the boats. Like I said, 9 knots is the dead slow ahead for some of the container vessels. You need a boat at least 12 to 15 knots doing cruising speed so that they can catch up with such vessels. Lack of standardized guidelines with respect to pilot boat design. Fatigued crew, the pilot gets on the vessel, then at least he has somewhat better stay on board. He is not encountering the weather, but the pilot crew poor fellows, they remain there and they are still facing the weather. So that is something which most pilots, they don't appreciate. Monotonous nature of the job, day in, day out, they are doing the same job, and lack of appreciation. I know of very few pilots who go and thank the pilot crew every time they are safely boarded and disembarked from the vessel. There's a lack of camaraderie, I would say. I think no efforts are required to just say a polite thank you. I think that makes it the day for them also. Then one of the points which most people would not discuss is challenges with respect to the pilots themselves. Pilotage is a highly physical and job, and as we grow old, we grow more experienced, but at the same time, we become physically weaker.
Yeah.
Less than perfect eyesight and hearing, slow in our response, and all the points are listed there. It's a fact.
Just 2 minutes, please, Captain.
It's a fact which we cannot wish away. And climbing the pilot ladder and then going onto the wheelhouse of a container vessel, they have I deck, H deck, and when you go up there, you have to check the vessel's position, and it is really physically demanding. And I think there is a requirement to have a better health monitoring of the pilots. And usually the people who get injured in piloting are the senior pilots, and usually the board crew also, if they see a risky behavior, they usually are afraid to call it out. Is there room for improvement? Certainly, yes. We can have standardized board design on the work done by Australian Pilot Association. I think we can have standardized designs. Speed requirements are there. Then some certain sea and swell conditions should be mentioned, beyond which pilot boats should not be used. And there's a need for a specialized training program for the boat crew, setting of physical standards for the pilots, and specifying the minimum PPE requirement. I think if these things are taken care of to a large extent, at least the pilot boats and the pilot crew can be minimized. But it's an holistic approach has to be taken. And like Simon has said, there is a need to reimagine the entire process. That's it. Thanks a lot from all of you for having invited me.
Yeah.
I am open to any queries or any questions which you may have. You can contact me personally also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Chauvet. That was excellent. Okay. All right, the last speaker, Captain Santosh Rangan.
Thank you, Capt.Ravi, sir. Introducing myself, this is Captain Santosh Rangan, sailing master with 3 years of rank experience, presently sailing with Fleet Management Limited, Hong Kong. I've been sailing on oil and chemical tankers from 2010. Moving on, a warm welcome and a massive thanks to all leading personalities of marine industry who delivered their valuable views in this webinar today. I also take the opportunity to thank all the viewers watching this webinar. My topic for the sessions is Sailing's Master's Perspective on Master's Pilot Exchange and Pilot Ladders and Pilot Transfers. I will say it's appropriate for me to discuss, and the reason, as I was in the chemical tankers on short port rotations and a lot to interact with the pilots and a lot to do with Master Pilot Exchange and the Pilot Ladders. However, I would like to get to everyone's notice that my perspective is not to cause any harm or to offend anyone without viewing this session. Pilotage. Pilotage is a specialized navigation activity that utilizes skills far beyond those required by a master or the officer on watch. They have the huge depth of knowledge regarding local areas, most up-to-date information available, port traffic, tug carriages, and much more. They have ship handling skills that have been planned, trained through years of experience with senior pilots and expertise that comes from maneuvering the ships in most demanding environment day in, day out. Okay. Let us discuss with the practical difficulties as a sailing master we face during the entire operation from the before taking the pilot until we reach the berth safe. The first more important thing is inadequate risk assessment with respect to the port operations. So inadequate risk assessment by the master prior arrival to the port or prior arrival to the pilot station. I strongly believe that if the port provides us with the pre-arrival port guide, pilotage planning, route planning, and a maneuvering planning comprises of master's pilot exchange, ordering pilot methods, boarding instructions, required boarding arrangement for the pilots, and the tug assistance recommendations, overview of the port's berth locations, and a passage plan from the pilot station to the berth covering the distance, speed restrictions in restricted waters, and the channel depth projection dimensions and the tide and restrictions of the port prior vessel arrival for the vessel to incorporate the same in the vessel's passage plan. Because most of the time, the vessel's passage plan is not matching with the pilot's passage plan once he comes on the board. So there will be a huge gap between the master, officer watch, and the pilot. And the second point will be uniformity in education. As a sailing master, we see that as different types of different ways of rigging the pilot ladder on each ship, but there is only one way of rigging is correct. I hope so that all persons who's involved in this operation will have to be educated the correct uniformity way of rigging the pilot ladders. And the next point will be the uniformity in construction. The new build ships can have a uniform way of constructing the pilot boarding arrangements, like providing the secondary support for the combination ladders, the intermediate securing methods, and also the if required can provide some FPD and securing methods. And the existing ships can same can be done in the next available dry dock. And let's come to the boarding area. So there is no uniformity in the pilot boats because every boats have a different pilot boats, and especially in monsoon seasons, there's difficulties in boarding area. As Captain Sansar already told very clearly that providing leave for the master in respect to the pilot boat, and due to monsoon seasons, getting heavy high swells and maintaining the vessels steering during the channels and after providing the lease, which is also affecting the pilot boarding instructions from the pilot, and that is one key things to address when during the pilot boarding. And moreover, sometimes we have a delay and change in the pilot boarding time or the location. Vessel asked to drift immediately, hold position in restricted waters, and since masters cannot deviate from the company policy on overshooting the pilot boarding points, then we are entitled to just hold position and drift in restricted waters. So the delay or change in the pilot boarding time is affecting our vessel's condition also. When the pilot comes on board, he has to undergo a master pilot exchange, not considering that the master is aware of the situation, neither the master is considering the pilot is aware of the vessel's characteristics. The proper checklist has to be gone through. It can be a short and crisp and a checklist from the pilot authorities, which can be discussed earlier on the port guide, but it can be a short and crisp checklist which has to be done religiously by the pilot and the master before taking over the con. And I personally feel there is a lot of misunderstanding between the pilot, master, and sometimes lack of attention by the pilot and the officer on watch, and communication gap has been increased between the pilot and the officer on watch. Most of the time, master is required to question all the required information. So we prefer that a listed information from the port should be provided to bridge the gap between the same. I suggest to provide a portable pilotage unit also for the pilot, because now we are going more to digitalization and same can be used on board. Same can be used on board. Same can be used on board once connected. It's a team effect, shared understanding, and always to be aware of the pilotage. And there's a lot of visual clues, and vessel has to keep focused on the pilotage to have a safe and effective communication. And the more important thing, the language barriers, usage of local language to the tug and the shoreman sometimes prevent effective communication.
Okay. It's two minutes, Captain Rangan. Yeah.
Yes, sir. The disembarkation prior, pilot on board, disembarkation prior, all fast of the vessels, and embarking to before embarkation to single up the moorings need to be avoided. And we can also provide the mission rehearsal, retrieving information from the ship for training purposes. because the same can be retrieved to ensure that vessel can be used for the training, and it can also be provided for the training for the pilots or for the ship masters if there is any problems happening. Actually, the goal of the webinar is to provide or share information with the aim of improvement for a safe and efficient operation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Captain Rangan. Yep. All right. The next thing is to look at some of the questions. So, one of the questions there is, why is the incremental investment over so many years not been done in the, so I think that only Captain Chobe can answer that question. That's a question of Captain Subadar.
Incremental investment with respect to...
Capt.Ravi doesn't apply to your port, but generally he's maybe talking about other ports in India. In your port, I believe it's run just like Rotterdam or any other main port around the world. But
I'll tell you, the thing is, because having worked with a government port and a private port, major reason is pilots are not visible. The port basically is meant for exchange of cargo operations. So when the ship is alongside, the pilot goes home or the pilot goes to his guest house, and he's not involved in the operations at all. And what the impact of this is, like the concerns which he has or he faces is not communicated to the management. And I would say that there will be very few managements who will not consider any recommendations which are made by the pilots. I think, but blame, if at all, lies with us. It does not lie with the management of ports at all. That is what I feel.
Okay, so Captain Karanjikar, that means that one of the issues is raising the profile of the pilots. Is that one of the goals of AIMPA?
Yes, indeed, sir. I mean, AIMPA is just started 1 year back. We have been active for 6 months.
Yeah.
So we are doing that relentlessly of raising the pilot profile.
Yeah.
And we suggested some measures to government also. Working on it.
Okay, so that would be actually explaining the critical role of the pilots, and so I think with that, I think that's what I get from the question, that people are frustrated that things haven't changed for many years, and they're feeling that as the ports got bigger, the trade got bigger, that more money should have been spent on improving, conditions for the pilots, better pilot boats, better equipment for the pilots. That's what an impression I get from the questions. I think that's a big question, and that's something that only you could take up on behalf of the pilots.
That's correct, sir. I mean, we are working on it. Solidarity in pilot itself was in question earlier, but now, of course, the pilots are coming together because the jobs are very fragmented. They work for ports in India. Ports are standalone entities in India, so all these factors are as well there.
Okay.
But we are definitely working on it, and you would see a wind of change already started. So you will see a very good news in, say, year and a half.
As an encouragement to you guys, I can tell you that the situation in Australia wasn't very different 30 years ago. Same thing. And then, all right, another question is tugs versus pilot boats from Sanjeev Mehra. He's not very... I thought that most of it was positive as far as the tugs was concerned, but so again, Captain Chobe can answer this question.
Sir, if you ask my experience, we have been handling maybe 3,500 vessels every year. If my pilots have to be made to go on a pilot boat, they would not like it. And of course, there are instances when the pilot boat is safer. If you have a low freeboard vessel or you have vessels which have got obstructions or something like that, maybe the pilot boat is easier to, it's safer. But overall, I think any given day you have an emergency or you have this thing, rescue operations or something, you are not going to take a pilot boat, are you? You are going to take a tug. So that itself says which equipment is safer as far as the pilot is concerned.
Okay, and Thanks very much for that. Of course, there's this big question of helicopter transfers. So, Janine, they'd like to hear from you about helicopter transfers.
Yeah, I would imagine.
The pros and cons of, yeah.
Yeah, helicopter transfers aren't without their own safety issues either, and have to be well considered against what vessels are designed for helicopter. Here we land on the hatch because 80% of our vessels are bulk carriers coming in ballast, ready to load cargo. I think when ports consider transfer methods, they're also weighing up the distance between where they need to board the vessels, the types of vessels they have. Is the efficiency there to outweigh the cost of that operation as well? So there's unique points to both aspects, and I think the important message for everyone is you've got to continually evolve and learn from them. Our helicopter operation we were doing 20 years ago is not what we need today. So again, we're embarking on a project on helicopter and about making sure it's fit for purpose for us for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, thanks very much. Simon, you have got some view on this, because there was a big change in helicopters on the reef, wasn't there?
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. And there certainly was, and it's quite recent. This was driven by one of the biggest mining companies in the world, BHP. And we were doing helicopter transfers on a 110 nautical mile transit in central Queensland. That's in each direction, so 220 nautical mile round trip using helicopters. And BHP, not because they had to, but because of their own internal policies, implemented a quite radical change to that operation. They brought in much bigger long-range helicopters, insisted on dual aviation pilots, insisted on a whole bunch more safety equipment, rescue equipment, and the cost of that whole operation for BHP around about quadrupled, just simply due to their safety policy. And I think that's a really good takeaway for everybody here, that yes, cost is important, and yes, we're in a commercial environment, but when an organisation puts safety ahead of all other considerations, you can actually make progress. That to me is a really big lesson from this. Whether it's helicopters or pilot launches or pilot training, now all of these issues are very closely interrelated. But if we're all going to just put the dollar as the absolute arbiter of our decision making, we're not going to get very far at all.
And the other thing too is in shipping, we're used to taking a lot more risks than other industries. Just give you an example, you guys, some of you guys in Mumbai. When I was working in SCI in the 60s, I actually myself and the other apprentice were painting the ship's name while the ship was plying through the seas the day just before we got to Mumbai, because the chief officer was very interested in becoming a captain, and the next day we had an inspection by the very formidable Captain Ramdev Kohli, who was the marine superintendent of the company. Can you imagine somebody doing something like that today? Just lowered over the side, no one to supervise us either. And that was not unusual. That was the kind of thing done at the time. So there has been quite a bit of improvement, and I think that once we start looking at things using safety principles from other industries, that we'll really make a big improvement. All right, let's see if there's any other question. That was a burning question about the helicopter. Yeah, the other one is about standards of training and medical fitness and things like that. So I think that's really in Captain Karanjikar's court. What have you got to say about that? There's questions about when are there going to be standards of training, physical fitness, and all those kind of things. There are questions asked by people, not just one. There's 3 or 4 people asked the question.
Yeah, AIMPA certainly has this in portfolio, but not immediately, because we are at the moment fighting with the pilot ladder and lives of pilot. I think the pilot personal fitness of pilots and medical examinations have been taken care of the port. And we don't want to, as an AIMPA, we don't want to meddle in the operations at the moment, because
I think they were
operate as autonomous bodies in India.
okay.
So it's all in the diplomacy for the AIMPA to handle all things in the right way. First, safety and security of pilots, and then the next part is all this. Thank you for the question. Anyway, I like the concern.
Yeah, okay. So just as an example, in Australia, we've had to change a lot of things. There's a thing called due diligence. The pilot ladder never used to fall under any law before, and now it's come under the Workplace Health and Safety Act, and that's got a very strict rules. And I think that's one of the reasons why in Newcastle they put so much effort into what happened after Malcolm Goodfellow's injury. Let's see if there's any other. All right, I think that's about all. It's about generally about standards and investing more in safety equipment, pilot boats, and so I think that most people have got something out of this session. I'm just looking at the question there. It seems that people are happy with what we've achieved in this session, and I think we've gone a bit over time. So I think we'll just. We'll just close it now and have a small break before we start the other one. Is that all right, Captain Karanjikar?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, let's go ahead. No problem. Rajesh, we can start the.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful session, and thank you to the excellent moderation and wonderful participation from the panelists. Thank you to the guests for bringing in pertinent questions that have amplified the purpose of the session. We have come to the conclusion of our first session, and Gajanan sir, a 5-minute break is fine.
Yeah, I think let us 3 minutes, or we can do without break as well, because everybody's relaxed.
I suggest we continue. We continue because everybody is at home, comfort. So giving break is when you are in a seminar or in a hall. I think we should continue. So we are running out of time.
Okay.
Sure. We will.
Okay, sir. Great. Thank you. It's time now for our second session of the day, Need for Pilot Training for Safety of Navigation. Like the previous session, we have a glittering panel of eminent speakers for the discussion, and it is my honor to introduce the panel members. May I first welcome the moderator, Captain Sudhir Subedar, former CEO and President of the Indian Coastal Conference Shipping Association, a nodal body of Indian coastal ship owners, operators, representing industry at the highest levels of government, including National Shipping Board, Indian delegation to the IMO, subcommittees at the center and states, drafting legislation and shipping policy, and trade bodies to date, 2013 to date, and assisting national waterways as such in Varanasi and Assam waterways. He is an active member of the DGS, Ministry of Shipping, IWAI team for developing new MS Act, IV Act, the Major Ports Act, and the Indian Ports Act, IMO empanel consultant and competent person for review of STCW whitelist, continuing his assignment for Russia, Brazil, Jamaica, Indonesia, Iceland, and Solomon Islands. He's also assisting Thailand, Iran, Maldives in STCW ISM implementation since 1996 to 2000. He's a warden of the Court of the Company of Master Mariners of India and founder president of the CMMI Pune chapter. Captain Subedar has been nominated twice for the National Maritime Day Award and has received numerous awards and felicitations for his stellar contributions to the world of shipping. He is also rightly described as the point of first and last information on all aspects of domestic shipping. It's a privilege to have such a luminary on board our webinar, and our gratitude is immense also on the part that you were kind enough to help us at the very last minute, as our previous moderator, Capt.Ravi Rajiv Pradhan, had to tend to an unavoidable domestic emergency. Thank you, sir, for that. Next, we have Captain Andrew Beasley, GM Potash, Australia, to speak on MAL-scale model training. Captain Beasley commenced his career with Howard Smith Shipping on 1983 and got his first command in February 1995. In August 1997, he commenced employment as a marine pilot with the Newcastle Port Corporation, spending the last 12 years as a check pilot and relieved in the position of acting harbour master for the Port of Newcastle on occasion. In July 2014, Andrew commenced employment with Portage, Australia as General Manager. He owns a facility for pilot training using the manned scale model. Captain Beasley will explore the use of manned models for ship handling training for marine pilots with us. Thank you for an enthralling presentation on manned scale models. Sorry, my mistake. I'm privileged to welcome again Mr. Simon Meyjes, ex-CEO of Australian Reef Pilots. He will be speaking on human factor in pilotage and safety of navigation. He has been kind enough to lend his expertise in both our sessions for the day. Next on the panel, we have Captain Gajanan Karanjikar, ex-Deputy Conservator of Mumbai Port and ex-Chief Ports Officer at Maharashtra Maritime Board, to speak on the topic benchmarking of pilot training in India. Captain Gajanan Karanjikar, as a teenager, aspired to join sea carrier. So when the opportunity came, he left 5th semester of mechanical engineering to join as a direct entry cadet. He assumed command of a vessel in 1985 at the age of 27 years. Pilotage fascinated him, hence decided to join Mumbai Port as a pilot in 1990. While serving in Mumbai Port Trust, he took an opportunity to undertake a year's voyage leave to sail out again. This gave him a different perspective of ship handling and watching other pilots carry out pilotage in international ports. He was deputed as Chief Ports Officer to Maharashtra Maritime Board. In his tenure, he had an opportunity of formulating policy for development of greenfield ports, ro-ro ferries in creeks, concession agreements, etc. He superannuated as Deputy Conservator of Mumbai Port in 2018 and is at present an advisor to Mumbai Port Trust on marine-related issues, particularly pilot entry training and career progress training. Presently, he is appointed as a marine advisor to Mumbai Port Trust. Next, we have Captain Jeff Parfitt, Director Maritime with Chirp UK. We know that Chirp stands for Confidential Human Factors Incident Reporting Program. Chirp endeavors to contribute to the enhancement of aviation safety in the UK and maritime safety worldwide by providing a totally independent, confidential, not anonymous, reporting system for all individuals employed in or associated with these industries. The Chirp Maritime program has been operating since July 2003. Jeff is a professional mariner with a career that spans 4 decades. He commenced his seagoing career with Shell in 1976. In 1996, he moved into the offshore world of dynamic positioning with Coflex Stena and Subsea 7, principally serving on dive, subsea construction vessels operating in the North Sea and on a global basis, becoming master in 2000. Prior to taking up the position as Director Maritime with Chirp, Jeff operated as an offshore marine consultant. Jeff will be speaking on analysis of an incident for pilot training and safety of navigation. I now request our moderator, Captain Sudhir Subedar sir, to kindly introduce the topic and set the tone. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, and a big thank you to Captain Karanjikar for inviting me.
Captain Beasley, the moderator, Captain Subedar sir, will be first introducing the topic, sir. After that, we will be speaking.
Sorry.
Just a minute, apologies.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Captain Karanjikar. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning in the western part of the world. In the first session, which is now running late by about half an hour, I request the panelists to be a little more crisp and be time bound and complete their presentation so that we have a little bit of interaction left at the end of the session. Each panelist would be given 10 minutes, and I shall give a warning if necessary 2 minutes before the time is out. I'm sitting in for my Ocean Sparkle colleague, Capt.Ravi Pradhan, Director Pilotage Services, and a nodal point for privatage pilotage services in India for over 25 years now. While pilot glider session was interesting and very much a rule requirement. Pilotage per se is really not yet a law. And I believe pilotage is an art which cannot be 100% trained oriented, and therefore the importance of pilotage training. I believe there is scope for uniformity, if not internationally, as in which IMPA is working on, International Marine Pilots Association, an observer of the Indian Maritime Organization. And AIMPA would be well within its scope to be a member of IMPA sooner than later and achieve this uniformity in pilotage training, and perhaps implement, like the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and so many other countries, a code of pilotage which describes entry point, suitable entry point, stepwise training, thresholds such as size of the vessel, time of day and night, accountability, and risk management. I hope the presentations that will follow now will touch on one or more of these aspects and bring us up to date on the way forward for pilotage training. May I now call upon Andrew to come forward and make his presentation, please. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good evening or good morning, good afternoon to all of you from Australia. And Captain Karanjikar, thank you very much for this invitation to present. I'd just like to bring up my presentation if that's possible. There we go. Share, right. Okay, can everybody see that first slide?
Yes, Captain Andrew, we can see that.
Okay, just for everybody's background or information, I'm Andrew Beasley from Port Ash, Australia. We're the Man Model Training Centre located on the east coast of Australia, and one of 7 man model training centres in the world. No doubt all of you are familiar with marine pilot training being delivered with electronic simulators, and since the 1960s we've also seen the use of manship model training for training of ship handling, not only for marine pilots, but for deck officers, masters, and naval officers as well. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I'll just refer you all to the slide on your screen there, the IMEI resolution A960, referring to training and certification standards or licensing standards for marine pilotage, with reference to what the initial marine pilot training should be, and it mentions both computer and man model training methods being mentioned in section 5.2 there. And also later on there it mentions as well in this resolution about the use of ship handling training for man models being used for maintaining marine pilot competency. So what we refer to in Australia is our ongoing continuous professional development, or CPD training. Man model training, what is it? Well, it is using, as you can see in the images there, accurately scaled ship models, combining with an accurately scaled lake facility, which generally represents a generic harbour and its approaches. And also you can see in the first image there the scale channels and also shallow water effects or shallow water areas to replicate all of the hydrodynamic effects that we experience when handling vessels in confined waterways and the approaches to confined waterways as well. And in the lower image there, you'll also see how we also at Port Ash uniquely used RC or continue to use RC tug models as well as a man tug model as well to simulate the ship tug interaction when we're training marine pilots in pilot tug operations. Primarily manned ship model focuses and has maximum value, I believe, in training for visual ship handling. Now, that's not to say that the electronic simulators, and I first used or was part of a team using a electronic simulator at our Maritime College in Tasmania back in 1984. And when I look at how far that particular simulator and a lot of the other electronic simulators have come, it's been an incredible improvement in the use of simulators and also how they deliver their training. And really the man models, they don't necessarily compete with the simulators. They complement the training that you can do in the electronic simulator. The great thing with man models is the training's conducted in a real world environment. It's not in the computer world or the mathematical world as such. It's conducted in the real world where you have all the vagaries of wind, current, all these other vagaries that we also can generate at our particular facility, and many of the other facilities in the world do similar as well. So primarily our focus, as it says in the slide there, is on the technical skill of visual ship handling. We like to see, and I think that overall in Australia now we're seeing a use of man model trainings, especially for the initial training of marine pilots and ship masters and ships officers as they're coming into the requirement to handle vessels. We've also seen a large or certainly an increased use of man model training by our Royal Australian Navy as well. So they're a big user of the facility as well. And once again as well, we see our Navy not only use computer simulation, but man model simulation like our marine pilots do in this country as well. And as it says on the slide there as well, both of these training mediums have their unique strengths and they complement one another in the overall training picture. Primarily looking at the man models here, where I think the best way to describe it is man models really bring the theory of the ship handling textbook to life. We've all studied ship handling, done the theory of it, read it out of textbooks, watched videos on it, perhaps observed as a deck officer like I did when I was a third mate, second mate, chief officer. And then as you become a captain and then later on as a pilot, you really get into the real nitty gritty of ship handling. Well, the theory side of it is something matched with the man models that really brings those textbooks to life in a big way. And that's something that I constantly see in feedback from course participants at Port Ash. I think one of the reasons for that is that the ship handler on the water in a man model physically feel and observe all of the hydrodynamic effects, especially in relation to things such as bank suction, vessel interaction. And you'll see in the slide pictures there, two vessels conducting a passing operation there in our narrow channel. Certainly generating current in our lake, being able to talk about the theory of how current effect on a man model affects the vessel's behaviour and then how it actually is best to handle situations, and also wind effects. Really, people get a great feel for that sort of thing in the man model environment. And one of the other great things with man models too, even though at times it can put a lot of pressure on the individual conducting the part of the training, is how the compressed time frame actually allows us to achieve an awful lot of training and learning outcomes in a short space of time. So in 1 hour exercise on the lake, we can achieve what you would probably only be able to achieve in 5 hours of real-time simulation and electronic simulator, or perhaps 5 hours of observation or supervised pilotage on real-time pilotage. In Australia, New Zealand area, and I'm including our New Zealand cousins across the ditch, as we call them, because we also see New Zealand pilots over in Australia on a regular basis as well. We've seen man model training as well used for evaluation of potential pilot candidates for entry into marine pilot training programs. We've seen it used certainly for the initial pilot training and visual ship handling, and also we see it used for CPD training or ongoing training for marine pilots in Australia. Our focus at Port Ash has been to look at the Australian Marine Pilots Institute, of which I've been a long time member of, and I really congratulate the Indian pilots for setting up your own institute or association. You will find it will give you a great deal of knowledge transfer amongst your colleagues, and also in conjunction with how you interact as well with perhaps other pilot associations from Australia, New Zealand, and indeed around the world. So we see AIMPA's CPD program as something we like to focus on as well, to provide what's required in their ongoing CPD development. In terms of man model training, there's listed some of the things that we see how a CPD training program, which is structured to provide and look at what's required from a professional development point of view. So there's a list of things there on the screen there that you can see, ranging from refreshing basic ship handling principles down to perhaps refreshing your knowledge and practicing using azimuth control devices, azipod ships on a scale model, tug operations. You'll see as well, it can be used for CPD training on the slide there. I realise I'm running out of time now, so I'm just going to skip over these next few slides. So we have as well the ability to simulate a lot of emergency contingency training, engine failures, rudder failures, tug failures, having to use anchors for emergency operations. These sorts of things as well are something that are structured into our emergency and contingency training, which is really the basis for our man model CPD training. You can see there another image of one of our other more sophisticated vessels there, our 289 metre cruise vessel fitted with twin azipods and bow thrusters, just for interest there. And just to conclude, why use man models for ship handling training? Well, they complement electronic simulation. Both training mediums have their own unique strengths. Combined with electronic simulation, both the training mediums cater especially well for initial marine pilot training and also for ongoing professional CPD training. They provide realistic hydrodynamic effects in a real-world environment, and most importantly to me, they really allow you to experience the feel of handling a ship in a simulator environment, which to me is a real positive of the man models. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for completing your presentation on man models in pilotage training and live experience that you have demonstrated, stemming from the IMO resolution A960, which dates back to 2004. Really, very little has been done in implementing the IMO resolution A960 in most parts of the world, quite unfortunately. We'll get back to you with some questions and some discussion at the end of the session. Now, may I request Simon to come forward and do his presentation, please. Simon?
Technical glitch, Simon, your screen is showing. I mean, you are presenting. You got to stop presenting, Simon.
Sorry, guys, my Zoom seems to have just dropped out there.
I always say we are so technically challenged, technologically challenged people. All of us in the same boat. Yeah. Shall we proceed?
Okay. Can everybody see that? Human factors in pilotage and safety of navigation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to, a very brief intro. The dynamic risks involved in marine pilotage are perhaps more challenging than any other industry. Most accidents involve human errors. Humans are fallible, we all make mistakes. We therefore need to discover how the constellation of dynamic, adapting human behaviours can reliably combine to produce safe outcomes. One thing that I reflect on often is the role of the pilot. And the most common definition of a pilot under Navigation Acts and various legislation reads that a pilot means a person who does not belong to, but has the conduct of a vessel. I've always found that a very curious description of the role of a pilot, that separation between responsibility and belonging to a team, and the way that sort of juxtaposition leads to human errors, team failures, and in fact blame, and all the awful outcomes of that. So I'm just going to focus at a very high level on human performance and error management. 90% of incidents are caused by human error. That's statistically a fact, and it's not just in maritime, that's pretty much across all areas of human endeavour. So what we are seeking as outcomes are safety interventions, tools and techniques to reduce not just human error, but the likelihood of human error resulting in an incident and primarily a major accident event. It's worth observing, and going back to my earlier talk, that looking at a holistic system, any flaws in the system impact the performance of the individual. So the system has to support the individual, and any flaws in the individual obviously impact the system. So we have to find ways to strengthen the individual. And that's really what human performance and error management theory and practice is all about. The science of human performance, and I'm calling it a science because this really is a very well-researched and proven methodology in error reduction. So it's designed to help us understand the impact of all of those factors surrounding the individual, which I described in my earlier flow chart, where you are as a pilot in the middle, and you are surrounded by the organisation, processes, programs, equipment, work environment, and other people. And the impact of those factors on safety. What human performance science looks to do is reduce the likelihood, particularly of a single person error leading to an accident. So it's about recognising how those impacts affect an individual when particularly making decisions and performing tasks. It's very important that we recognise our fallibility. We all make mistakes, we will always make mistakes. No amount of training can make us perfect. We are not robots. And, you know, there's been a lot of blame culture surrounding the maritime industry for centuries now. But in this modern era, we've become much more enlightened, and particularly the safety scientists such as James Reason, Sidney Decker, and many others in their wake, promote this idea of a safety culture which focuses not on blame, but on fixing things. And that's really what this whole human performance and error management program is about. So we look to predict under what circumstances we will make errors, because these errors are inevitable due to our innate fallibilities. And we also look to design systems that do not use humans as the only line of defence against major accidents. So again, I go back to the holistic view and the safety case. This has got to be a multi-pronged, holistic approach to designing a system based on the safety case with its objective of preventing major accident events. We know, and the scientists have proven, that error-likely situations are predictable and they are preventable. And we've developed ways to recognise them. So if we can recognise dangerous situations before they develop into errors, that's a great step forward. So the major focus areas of human performance are firstly understanding our performance modes. And these are the mental modes in which we operate. And they're generally categorised into three mental modes. The first is the skill-based performance mode. And this is a cascading modal view based on expected error rates. So when we're in a skill-based mode, this is a mode where we're conducting tasks based essentially on habit. These are things that we have done so often that we do them almost to perfection. And the science has proven that the error rate, the individual error rate when we're in the skill-based mode, is about 1 in 1,000. The next category of performance mode is the rule-based performance mode, and that is we're not actually operating robotically or automatically, but we've got a set of rules. We know the rules, we've memorized the rules, and we can importantly access the rules. So when we're operating in this mode, our error rate is not 1 in 1,000. It actually increases dramatically to 1 in 100. That could be because we took a shortcut, or we incorrectly interpreted the rule, or quite often the rule is simply wrong. And the riskiest mode is the knowledge-based performance mode. And the actual error rate here is about 1 in 2, quite often. And when we're operating in the knowledge-based mode, we don't know what the rules are. We're solving problems on the fly. We're troubleshooting. We become very confused, and we've got lots of questions. And so human performance is focused on having us operate in a skill-based performance mode. And this is a management issue. We actually have to engineer our safety systems to ensure that we humans can operate, generally speaking, in a skill-based performance mode. The other thing that we need to think about are the error traps, and there are 10 that significantly increase the likelihood of errors occurring. By reducing, or by recognising what these error traps are in advance, we reduce the likelihood of errors leading to incidents and accidents. The top 10 error traps are stress, particularly important in the maritime domain because of the dynamic nature of it. High workload, again, we would all recognise that in maritime, and there are economic drivers as well as other things. Time pressure, Again, economic drivers there. Poor communications, vague or poor work guidance, and that goes back to whether the procedures actually describe what we should be doing accurately. Infrequent or first-time tasks, and that's a real error trap. So that when we only do something occasionally, we obviously are not operating in a skill-based performance mode because we can't remember how we did it the last time.
2 minutes more, Simon.
Okay, thank you. They're really the major error traps that I'd like to discuss now, but there are more in my PowerPoint presentation. Error triggers. So these are observable actions or reactions or recognises thoughts or gut feelings that something isn't right. Examples where situations are outside of procedures. And what we need to do is proactively analyse work processes in advance so that we can predict error triggers and identify potential error traps. One of the really curious things is this concept of the workaround and the difference between work as it is done and work as it is imagined. And the term work as it is imagined is what's written in a procedure. So we've all got systems and procedures, and what we all try and do is sit down and write the way to do a particular task. Quite often, that's not actually the way we do it, because we in the field, we're very inventive, us humans, and we find that the procedure isn't actually the best way to do it. So we develop a workaround, and then there become gaps in our safety management system. And I've got a particular case study that I lecture on around this particular gap. And it was only a small gap, but it did result actually in quite a serious incident that resulted in a big maritime investigation here in Australia. But it's really incredibly important that our systems and procedures are constantly reviewed to ensure that we always narrow the gap between work as it is imagined in a procedure and work as it is actually done in real life in the field by the operators. So the human performance tools and techniques focus on an organisationally wide level at what I call team resource management, which is really just a broader description of what you would call bridge resource management. So it really has to encompass the entire end-to-end process of maritime operations, and encompassing all of those resources. That goes back to my original workflow description there of the organisation, the processes, programs, equipment, work environment and people to get those defences and safeguards. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the James Reason Swiss cheese model. It's a very old pictorial which is still entirely relevant today, and it's all about creating defences to these traps and triggers against human errors. Just to reinforce the real key areas of TRM or BRM, it's about communication, shared mental models, challenge and response, fatigue management, workload management, the concept of maximum situational awareness, which has now become really the focus of a lot of work here, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, and also in the Netherlands, the great work that Antonio Delito has been doing over there. And then a lot of psychological science about judgment and decision-making processes and culture. And perhaps that's my last comment is about safety culture. And to me, the most important element of a safety culture in an organisation which can drive improvement is just culture. And the core feature of just culture is a reporting culture. So people need to be free, unhindered, unfettered to report. And my own experience of that in fostering a reporting culture has just been absolutely fantastic. That if you can encourage your people to report anything and everything in a no-blame situation, you'll get immediate results. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Simon, you touched upon the aspect of human element, reporting, etc. And it's at the core of the SPCW. If you will all recall, SPCW is built upon this human element matter, which now runs through the whole rigmarole of everything that IMO is doing or will ever do. The reporting, we have a speaker on that, and we will touch upon the reporting a little later on. May I now request my friend and colleague, Anand Karkare, to come forward, please.
Thank you very much. In fact, Captain Subedar is my guru. He has got so much of experience and knowledge that it is always a good company that we learn a lot of things from him. First and foremost, let me thank, good day to everybody, and I thank All India Maritime Pilot Association for inviting me on this webinar and give a talk on pilotage, benchmarking or pilot training in India. I will share my screen with you now. Okay, is it visible now? Is it visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. Having learned, now the session is in the second part. I will run through the slides because the main issues of pilotage everybody has talked of. I would like to bring in just in the fast that pilot is what? Is a guide with the knowledge and expertise. He offers this service to the ship. There are, I believe, some few students from the Maritime Training Institute. So for their sake, I'm just repeating it over here that master is in command of the vessel. Now, regarding the pilotage training, they always, whenever any candidate master joins a service, he undergoes the training. The training is an integral part of maritime pilot's job, but it doesn't end over there. The pilot's day-to-day work itself is a training, because in everyday's maneuver, whatever he carries out, there are so many variables, such as the ship's engine, the wind, the current, the type of tugs which are utilized. So every day what he does is a learning by itself. Yes, there are nowadays technological advantages there, but the experience and knowledge can never be replaced. Over the period of years, the pilot has to develop the skill. Now, what is the skill? Skill is a assimilation of the know-how, experience, and apply it in day-to-day operations, and particularly in case of emergency. So that's where the skill matters. And main thrust in pilot training is to improve the skills of a pilot. Now, regarding this benchmarking, what we are talking of, the benchmarking is traditionally a comparison of one product or a service with the other. But in case of pilot training, benchmarking is essentially of the training implemented and the aids used for training of a pilot. The previous speaker had already dealt upon, so I'll run through this one. The IMO resolution A960 has emphasized upon the establishment of practical and minimum training standards, examination and certification. So this is one which everyone has to take note of. That further refers to the operational procedure, then the interpersonal relationship, ship procedure guides, The further the IMO 960, which one is really important, that competent pilotage authority in cooperation with the national and international, national and local pilot association should establish entry requirement, develop the standards for certification, license for pilotage. Further, in this one, I would say that the another aspect which is there, IMO 960 deals upon, is that the investigation report. Quite often it happens in port, or for that matter, the investigation is carried out and it is just filed. It is not discussed publicly so much. Here, the main thing is that it is not a blame game, the investigation report, yes, but it is a learning experience. So that has to be promulgated to advertise or publish, and each and every port authority can learn from that experience and take a key takeaway points. The Article 5 has recommended that or has completely said that the pilotage authority is responsible for training. Further, it has said that the continuous professional development is a must. Now we look at considering this IMO 960 regulation, we look at the Indian pilotage scenario. As of today, what is the main issue of the pilotage? In India, the current scenario is, for that I'll briefly explain you what is a major port and a non-major port. In India, the central government controls, those are ports are called as a major port, and non-major ports are controlled by the state government. Except Kolkata, the entry point qualification is a certificate of competency as a master foreign going. The training period is normally 3 to 6 months. Training mode, even now today, is most of the ports is attending with senior pilots. Very few ports have started a simulator training, and examination is conducted viva voce. That means there is a board comprising of deputy conservator, harbor master, senior pilot, dock master, and a master mariner who is visiting that particular port quite often. So he is called for the examination. This board examines the candidate, and once they are satisfied, they recommend him to the Ministry of Shipping, and on the recommendation, Ministry of Shipping issues a pilotage license. So that is the scenario as of today in the major port. At each higher tonnage notch, the pilot attends the ship with the senior pilot, and he is granted the higher tonnage after the requisite number of ships which he attends. But there is no examination when he goes on the higher tonnage. But the other legislation and the other rules regulation is a self-learning process. In regarding the pilotage service providers for non-major ports, they mostly depend upon the pilots which are from the major port, whereas nowadays Reliance, Adani, and there are a few other ports who have robust established training system for the pilot, and they have their own simulator and the proper training program they have. The maritime boards which look after the non-major ports, they are yet to formulate the pilotage regulations. So there is a need to formulate pilotage regulations so that it is a streamlined affair. As of today, the non-major ports, they do not have any training program. It's just a familiarization. And whenever some port applies to the maritime board at the request of their port's information, the maritime issues a license to that pilot. But recently there has been a development. On 19th May 2020, Ministry of Shipping has promulgated guidelines for pilots in major ports. These guidelines are based upon IMO A960 regulation. It comprises of the same what has been recommended in IMO Bridge Resource Management course, with specific thrust on emergency situations, initial entry level training at Indian Maritime University. The syllabus has not been formulated as yet for this particular issue, but it is expected to be about for a month or so. Subsequently, on job training at the port, headed by the port specific training on simulator. Trainee pilot will undergo written, viva, and the simulator-based examination. This is a improvement over the existing policy or the practice which is being followed in major ports. Till now, the licensed unrestricted tonnage pilot did not require to take a course. In fact, I would say that regarding my case also, when I became a full tonnage pilot, and after that, I didn't have to do any further course. So it's sort of a complacency set in. But at the same time, whenever the new technological advance had come, during my days, the EGDIS was a new thing which had started coming in. So I had to do kind of a self-learning process. That means after piloting, I had to stay back and ask the master, how does it work? What all things are there? So instead of that, if there is a refresher course, and which has been recommended by the Ministry of Shipping now, it is a much better thing. So as per the new policy now, the existing unrestricted tonnage pilot has to undergo the course which talks of recent development in navigation aid, legal, regulatory, and guideline changes, and pilot to meet the medical fitness and undergo examination at regular intervals.
Time to finish, Anand.
Okay, I'll just run through. For Indian pilotage service to be reckoned as benchmarking, what we can do is that I had come across the European Union CertiPilot tool that helps the pilot organizations Europe about the internal training needs and the training path. So the level of coherence we should have for the national framework, major and non-major ports should have a policy on minimum common standard of training. Now, another thing, what earlier the man model, what we had thought of or we had known, it is a very good thing. I will come to that one. The pilotage is a commercial operation. There is no scope for trial and error. It demands the utmost levels of concern of safety, and for that you need to have a mental characteristic which can perform in utmost extreme pressure, and for that you require a self-confidence, clear communication skill, situation awareness, and risk assessment aptitudes. So this is a must for a maritime pilot. For this, I would strongly recommend a psychometric test at entry level, as is done in the airline industry. I would go further ahead, and when the examination is done, the medical examination, at the same time, some kind of a psychometric test also should be carried out, so that you are absolutely sure that pilot is totally fit to carry out tasks, particularly in emergency situation. I have come across in Mumbai during there was a fire in our oil tanker terminal. Pilots had to cast off the ship without a tuck or with just one tuck, and that is where the skill of pilot comes and the strength of the mental strength of the pilot comes. So that's why I would recommend that psychometric test. Now, pilot is the first point of contact. Here, I would recommend the bridge resource management with special emphasis on interpersonal relationship, particularly with different nationalities on board. It is quite often nowadays that you come across 5, 6, or 7 nationalities. So when the pilot boards the ship, he has to immediately, within 10 minutes, he has to, not even 10 minutes, I would say within 3 minutes, he has to familiarize himself with the type of crew, what is the response of the engine, what kind of whether the helmsman responds quickly, whether he understands the orders quick or not. So these kind of issues are there. So the bridge resource management course should be focusing on to interpersonal relationship and considering the different nationalities on board. Importance of precise, clear communication is also in the part of bridge resource management. With increase in size, it is a man model thing is a must, because we cannot afford to take a ships close to each other and learn about the interaction between the two ships or find out the bank suction, bow cushion effect. That cannot kind of things we cannot try it on the nowadays on the ships. So thus the only thing is the man model. Simulator, yes, is there, but the man model takes a real, gives you the real feel of all these effects. Now regarding the models based training, at present I'm with the Mumbai port for carrying out the syllabus. Initially I started with syllabus. I was wondering how would I do it, and when I started dealing into it, I realized the in depth how much we have to do. In fact, I have prepared about 8 modules, and looks like I am going to go further up to 10 modules dealing with all the topics. One of them is a code of safe practices in embarking and disembarking. This particular one, because last year I lost a dear colleague of mine, Captain Gupta, in pilot transfer. So this one I would say is the most important. The another thing is here is that course on personal safety and personal retrieval techniques. When somebody falls, how to retrieve him? It is a very difficult task, particularly in monsoon time. It is a difficult thing. So those kind of courses has to be included in the module. Another one is disaster management and contingency. Like in case of fire, how do you tackle? How do you cast off the ship? So these are the ones we have learned and we should include that in the module. Simulator-based training is must, as everybody knows. In this one, I would say that first the initial thing should be in the simulator training, initially into the module. Then he goes, understand the techniques of the ship handling on simulator, attends the ship with the senior pilot, and again comes back on the simulator and gets examined. That would be the right thing to do. In India, the man model training has not been done as yet. One of the marine training institutes are into the process of finalizing the model training. I hope it comes soon. The other thing what I would recommend is that pilot training and service record book for all the pilots, with especially, when a pilot is issued a license in any port, he should be allotted a number, unique number as of the INDOS, so that it will be continuously with him. It will have, and also he will have a record book, so that when he migrates from one port to another port, he has the record. According to that, the port authority also can decide the level of training how can be given and how long can he be trained. So these are the few things which I would like to bring to the notice. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with me. Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you. Very important topic, and therefore you needed to run through the last few slides. Hope we have a little bit of interaction, particularly on the subject of uniform training, which I can see some questions and discussion coming up there. May I now request Jeff to come forward? Very important aspect, as one of the speakers earlier mentioned, report everything and everything. So let's hear from Jeff on the reporting methodology to make use of. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Captain Karanjikar for the generous invitation to address the All India Maritime Pilots Association. Chirp Maritime is the world's foremost confidential maritime reporting program designed for mariners, and as such we receive confidential reports on near misses directly from the seafarer. Many of the reports received are from pilots. In fact, it makes up a sizable percentage of what we do receive. The experience of pilots in India regarding the use of pilot ladders is certainly not unique, and in common with the rest of the world, you share similar problems, such as poorly designed vessels, inadequately maintained ladders, inadequately rigged ladders, poor supervision, dangerous trapdoor arrangements. These are all commonly shared experiences of your profession. It would seem that the simple procedure of rigging a pilot ladder to facilitate embarkation and disembarkation has become one of the most dangerous aspects of a pilot's life. Not only do the pilots have to concern themselves with the complexities of the job, from maneuvering huge vessels, often in challenging conditions, to routine port arrivals and departures, coping with defective vessel equipment and language difficulties, and of course, coping with the unexpected emergency. The pilots also have to deal with what should be the relatively easy part of getting on and off a vessel. And we find that the perennial issue of pilot ladder failings is once again the subject of intense debate. Such has been the overwhelming number of reports received on this subject, Chirp Maritime decided to analyse the reports received, which are free from corporate interference and represent the view directly from the reporters. There are many recurrent themes in these reports, with the same latent failings appearing time and time again. And so we decided to produce an analysis of the reports in order to determine the areas in which the deficiencies are occurring. The analysis is based upon 124 reports that we received during 2019. We broke the reports down into the main areas of concern using keywords in order to build up a picture of areas which required immediate remedial action. We've published a report. It is available on our website. There it is, freely available on our website at chirpmaritime.org, should you want a copy. It is perhaps no surprise that the greater number of non-conforming vessels were constructed prior to the advent of the current regulations, that is, ships built before 2012, made up 62% of the reports. However, all the vessels have undergone a statutory 5-year refit since 2012 regs came into force and have had ample opportunity to modify their arrangements in order to comply with SOLAS Chapter 5. Yet in many instances, this has not been done, and Chirp queries why this is so and refuses to accept that the excuse we comply with pre-existing older regulations is a satisfactory answer. The lives of maritime pilots are being endangered day in and day out, so it is incumbent upon shipping companies, classification societies, flag state administrations, and vessel crews to ensure that the arrangements are 100% compliant. When we looked at the deficiencies of pilot ladders, it was a damning indictment that 42% of the reports received highlighted uneven steps, loose chocks, ladders in poor condition, or in one case, the side ropes parted completely when weight was placed on the ladder prior to disembarkation. And this highlights a deficient safety culture and a woefully poor quality of seamanship, as well as indicating a complete disregard for the safety of the pilot who has to use a ladder. It should be noted that a small percentage of the uneven steps and chocks were in fact on ladders that were relatively new and manufactured ashore. We are aware that in some cases this was followed up by the Port of National Administration, who contacted the manufacturer. Some pilot ladders that had been manufactured ashore with certificates issued had actually arrived on board varnished. A third of the reports highlight that the side ropes are supported by shackles, bars, or a bracket. SOLAS does not state how the side ropes are to be secured, but only mentions that the arrangement must be the same or greater strength than the side rope. Brackets or equivalent must be stronger than the side ropes, but the load usually impacts upon the steps and the step seizings. A very serious recurring theme in the reports received is the lack of understanding as to how to properly rig a pilot ladder. Some pilots have reported to Chirp that they see the bracket bar or shackle arrangement as the lesser of the two evils compared with the standard of seamanship that they observe, with the pilot ladder side ropes being correctly lashed onto the vessel's deck. The hitches used have been observed to be completely unsafe and the associated rope work substandard. And we note that SOLAS 2012 is vague with respect to the actual securing. So Chirp strongly believes that the pilots should not be faced with the lesser of the two evils, and that 100% compliance with any pilot ladder rig should be the only acceptable expectation. Thus, much of the foregoing comes down to safety culture, seamanship, training and supervision, both on board and ashore, and there appears to be a long way to go in this respect. If we look at the accommodation ladders that are used in combination, almost 50% of the reports relate to either the accommodation ladder itself and or the pilot ladder not being secured to the ship side as required by the 212 SOLAS regs. Another significant percentage describes the accommodation ladder itself being less than 5 meters above the waterline. Anything other than a light swell can cause damage to either the attending pilot vessel or the accommodation ladder itself. And although we have a smaller percentage of other defects, they are viewed as extremely dangerous. And that is that the accommodation ladder steps are not level. There is a lack of safety ropes on the accommodation ladder and sometimes no stanchions rigged at the bottom of the ladder or at the pilot access. Chirp Maritime argues there is no excuse for this. This is safety culture and supervision in its poorest form. When we look at deficiencies with respect to trapdoor arrangements, we receive 25 reports on these deficiencies. The reason for this is not at all surprising, as it is almost universally impossible to rig a trapdoor arrangement that is 100% compliant with SOLAS. The largest areas of failing are the pilot ladder being secured to the bottom of the accommodation ladder, the pilot ladder not being attached to the ship sides 1.5 meters above the accommodation ladder, and access being non-compliant. This has caused repeated difficulties for the pilots to make the transition from the ladder to the accommodation ladder. Chirp asked the question, who authorised these arrangements? Fully compliant trapdoor arrangements, such as 3-sided trapdoor rings, are noted to be few and far between. The general view is that the sooner these arrangements are either modified to full compliance or are removed from service and banned altogether, the better. We also note that man ropes are often incorrectly rigged. Notwithstanding deficiencies reported, these failings came down to a basic lack of seamanship, supervision, safety culture, and training. And this is one area where any change to pilot ladder regulation is unnecessary, as all the deficiencies can be addressed on board to ensure that man ropes are rigged correctly. The remaining deficiencies were the lack of deck fittings for side ropes and man ropes. Incorrectly rigged retrieval lines, often called tripping lines, could be fouled upon the pilot launch or obstruct safe access to the ladder for the pilot. We have recently highlighted the ship side issues where there is no 6-meter gap in the rubbing band on some vessels to allow safe access for the pilot boat. Classification societies and regulators often give dispensation at the construction phase, so pilot boats have complained they may become trapped under the rubbing band in a heavy swell. But what we have found is that there is absolutely no excuse for a responsible officer not being in attendance during the embarkation or disembarkation of a pilot. And this highlights a disregard for the safety of any pilot boarding operation and exposes deficiencies in crew manning. Overall, our report does make depressing reading for any maritime pilot who has had his or her life needlessly endangered. There appears to be an unacceptable disregard of the 2012 SOLAS regulations and the accompanying IMO resolution. Our reports also indicate a low level of awareness and poor seamanship standards, all of which are very much avoidable. And ship managers, port state control, classification societies and flag state should intervene rather than turning a blind eye to the problem. In conclusion, a clear picture has emerged of the principal failings relating to the rigging of pilot ladders. Apart from the questionable quality of some new ladders, Chirp queries how these products are deemed acceptable at the manufacturing stage, and of course the issue of seamanship. And this leads us to some uncomfortable conclusions about the quality of training and supervision at the basic level of a seafarer's skill and the quality control among ship managers. Either way, the situation is unacceptable in such poor regard and understanding of professional standards, and safety culture continues to expose pilots to unacceptable and unnecessary levels of risk. There are other elements of pilotage which is not really covered in this brief, but I feel the need to mention it because we get reports on it. And that is the Master Pilot Exchange. We receive many reports from pilots on the lack of Master Pilot Exchange, leading to misunderstandings in communications, such as the number of engine starts available, defective instrument displays, turning ratios, stopping distance, the quality of tugs and mooring arrangements. I would therefore urge you to submit any near-miss reports through our online confidential reporting program, and we will be only too pleased to respond and promulgate your safety message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. I hope your suggestions on reporting are taken on board by all the listeners of this webinar. I personally believe incident and accident reporting is one of the very misunderstood and less practiced at sea. In civil aviation, for example, near miss reporting not done goes against the pilot of that flight. Another statistic is that 600 near miss reports is equal to 60 accident reports, which convert into one accident. And therefore, there is very good reason to build on the Chirp kind of report. Almost every company can do it in-house. And therefore, I now request audience in this webinar to ask questions to any of the panelists. That is Andrew, Simon, Anand, and Jack. And I have 3 noted questions which come from the chat. I leave the floor open for a few minutes, and then I will ask the panelists the question which have been posed on the chat box. Anybody for the first question, please? Please unmute yourself and ask the question. Introduce yourself if you can.
Hello, this is Captain Kumar.
Yes, Captain Kumar.
Good afternoon, everybody, and excellent presentation so far, and especially Jeff. I think you had summed up the role of Chirp and the amount of statistics that you read across, and saying that all the authorities who are concerned seem to be turning a blind eye to the safety of a pilot, from the master of the ship down to everybody. That's a very good take. And as Suveda said, incident reporting, near miss reporting is on the cards. My question to you pertains to, you did mention that trapdoor arrangement, which is there, is not really feasible on board a ship. What solution do you have for that? The combination ladder, the trapdoor arrangement is really not feasible on a board ship if it has to comply with 2012 SOLAS. Then what is the solution for it?
Yeah, well, I don't have a solution for it, but clearly the design aspect is a major concern. One of the major problems that classification society are continuing to give dispensation to some of these huge vessels where the pilot boarding area is perhaps apt at the turn of the hull, the turn of the bilge. And when these ships are in ballast, the ladder is swinging in free space. So it is a design issue, and I am not a designer, but clearly it's unsafe. New York lost a pilot within the last 12 months with these trapdoor arrangements, and it is a very common complaint, but I don't have a solution to that.
Thank you, Jeff. That was nice. And then I had always been wondering, what is the purpose of man ropes on pilot ladders? I really do not find any significant purpose for a man rope. It sways in the wind and interferes with the pilot climbing up. What is the purpose of a man rope? It's much better to hang on to the pilot ladder and then climb up. And you do have the resist so that your fingers do not get crushed on the ship side as you use the actual rope of a pilot ladder instead of the man rope. And man rope is fundamentally meant to climb from the last step of the pilot ladder onto the deck, where you do not have more number of steps available. You have a stanchion, and the man rope should lead from the top of the stanchion. Many ships, I find, they do not do that. But this is something that the purpose of man rope itself has not been understood by many people who are sailing.
Actually, I tend to agree with you. I've never used a man rope, but it's always been there as a requirement or as an addition. But I also only use the ladder ropes as well. Interestingly, there has been some research into updating the design of a pilot ladder, and one of the interesting developments is the synthetic ropes are used, where the lay runs against the downward pull, and the pilot's gloves bite in to the lay. Of course, that presents other problems when the pilot may choose to jump onto a pilot boat, his hands may stick on the rope. So there are some design alternatives being thrown around at the moment.
Subedar sir, considering the number of participants in the webinar, sir, and a lot of questions already in the chat box, maybe please take up the questions in the chat box one by one, so then we'll look at opening up the floor, please.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Rakesh. So my first question from the chat box is to Simon. What could be done to build up the safety culture?
Look, my views are very, I guess, Australian-centric. There's culture around this which complicates things, and I find it very difficult to sort of parachute myself into an Indian context, even though I've been dealing with Indian seafarers for most of my life. But it really has to be something driven at board of director level, is my view. There has to be a passion from the higher stakeholders of an organisation to develop a corporate culture which allows people to speak, to report, and just simply puts safety first. And I think that any organisation that's not prepared to do that is not going to achieve the outcomes required. I was very, very lucky at Australian Reef Pilots. When I joined the company, the board of directors essentially gave me a blank check on safety. And I had enormous freedom, and that's where Ravi came in, and together and with all of the pilots, we were able to join forces and work really hard on these cultural issues. I think it's an enormous challenge for pilots to go this alone without management support.
Yes, Simon, I agree with that. And I would say that training is one of the ways to build safety culture. When one knows and when it's competent, there is more safety culture all around. The board level discussions perhaps is not as tangible as just ordering training and retraining. The next question is to Captain Karkare. Anand, what is preventing us from having uniform pan-India guidelines, rules, regulations for pilotage?
See, so far there is actually, as Capt.Ravi had said earlier, it has to come from the bottom-up approach, because of the pilots got to themselves to take up this issue. And at least now the Ministry of Shipping has come up with this guidelines for the major port. So taking a cue from this kind of a seminar or webinar, we should take it up to the ministry and have what I suggested, a common platform or common guideline for the both major as well as non-major ports. So far it has not been done. In fact, if I can remind you, if you remember that with the nautical advisor, Captain Sargi, you and me had kind of drafted a policy for non-major ports pilotage, and it has still not come about. So the main thing is that it has to be followed and it has to be taken up at the ministry level.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you very much. I have just one more last question from the chat box, and I should direct that to Jeff or Simon. What is the lacuna in the grandfather clause of SOLAS 2012 regulations regarding pilot ladder arrangements?
Can I just chip in there, because I've got some experience about this with some bulk carriers in Australia regarding the grandfathering clause. So a major shipping company basically said to us, we've got this grandfathering clause, we're not going to do anything until we dry dock our ships, so you'll just have to put up with it. And from our point of view, that was unacceptable, because there was a practical solution to re-engineer these vessels that we were having to board. And our issue was the accommodation ladders at an angle of about 55 degrees. And it was, really, really difficult, particularly when they were wet. The ladders were far too steep. So after quite a lot of dialogue and negotiation, this major company agreed to make the engineering changes outside of their dry docking cycle. And I think, these grandfathering clauses, they might be there, but they are negotiable. And it's up to us as an industry to put pressure on ship owners and ship managers to actually make the necessary changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Jeff, do you want to add anything on grandfather clause problems in SOLAS 2012?
No, I mean, Simon has had more experience of it than me, but he obviously captures it very well. And unfortunately, it does, it sort of emphasizes the point that where is the shipping, where is the safety culture of the shipping company? Where is their empathy with the seafarers and the pilots? And I'm just thinking of, I think Simon mentioned in his first briefing, they encourage or support their pilots to not board ships with unsafe pilot boarding arrangements. And that would appear to be the key, but you need to have a strong port behind you to support that, because we also get reports of pilots operating under duress. They do not board vessels.
Thank you, Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, due to paucity of time and no more questions I see on the chat box, may I request that those of you who have still some questions to ask of the organizers or the association, please put them on the email to me or to Gajanan or to Anand Karkare, and we shall get back to you from as soon as possible. I hand over to Rajesh for the closing ceremony. Rajesh, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful session, and thank you to the excellent moderation and wonderful participation from the panelists. Thank you to the guests for bringing in relevant questions that have enhanced the value of this session. It is my proud privilege to be entrusted with the responsibility of delivering the vote of thanks at such an august event with a truly pioneering backdrop. However, it would be not correct on our part to not summarize the points that have been discussed in both the sessions. And I would begin first with a small summary of our points, which will be added on to later and which will be taken up by AIMPA for further discussions at the ministry level, at the regulatory level. From the first session, a very brief list of summary points. We need to work to enhance the profile of the pilots in the eyes of the port community and the regulators, in particular, in order to get better safety, security, and welfare facilities for the pilots. Number two, include pilot ladder specifically in local regulations to enforce safer conditions more effectively, and AIMPA needs to work on that. Number three, make pilot boat construction and crew training more standardized, considering the immense effect on pilot safety. These are just few of the points which we have come up with. We will be further developing on this from the first session, and taking it forward. For the second session, two pertinent points: training procedures to be reviewed with refresher training provisions to be included for the pilots. And like Captain Karkare has said, there are already draft guidelines from the ministry on the major ports. So pilotage training, however, to be made more standardized, but AIMPA will only play as an enabling agent in this, since pilotage is a very, very port specific domain, and pilotage basically is a safety operation within a commercial perspective. Each port has its own unique requirements for training, and it should be developed by the port side, from the side of the ports for their requirements. A very wonderful suggestion given: continuous professional development to be encouraged in whichever way possible under the present circumstances, and taken up very seriously for the pilots. Captain Subedar, sir, anything else you would like to add as a summary for the session, sir, please?
I would like to conclude that pilotage is an important infra of port, and it should get its due in all its decision making, from making of port to running of the port. Pilotage cannot be seen in isolation. It should be part of the port infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, which very well noted. We will include it in our deliberations forward.
Yes.
I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to the eminent speakers and panelists for taking time out from their busy schedules and choosing to grace our event with their wonderful participation. Next, I would like to place on record sincere thanks to Captain Gajanan Karanjikar, Chief Organizer of the event, and AIMPA, along with the entire organizing committee, to have put together such a first of its kind on many levels initiative. Our partners, Mr. Sanjeev Mehra from Institute of Marine Engineers, Captain D.K. Jha and Captain M.P. Bhasin and the entire court from the Company of Master Mariners of India, Captain Kapil Dev Bahl from the Nautical Institute, Captain R.K. Kumar, Mr. Ranjit Chirat from the term Chirp, deserve a special thanks for being pillars of strength for the organizers. We have also been extremely privileged to be graced by several leading members of the fraternity, dignitaries in their own rights and achievers. And I would like to just mention a few of them here. Firstly, Ms. Gillian Carson Jackson, President of the Nautical Institute. Thank you very much for being part of our initiative. We have Captain Subhash Deshpande, Extra Master, ex-pilot, Mumbai Port Trust. Senior Mariners, Captain Preetham Mohanty, Captain Soman Mani, Captain Mahesh Yadav, Captain Joseph Alapat, Captain Glenn Saldana, Sri NMC Nair, among many others who have chosen to grace us in this event. Our sincere thanks to our media partners, Bandaka Publications and Marix, for their wonderful support. Lastly, the participation of our dear guests, including senior fraternity members who have chosen to spend time with us this Saturday and make our humble endeavor memorable. I apologize that we may not have been able to take up all the questions asked due to the paucity of time. If I have missed out anyone in my humble vote of thanks, I seek forgiveness with folded hands, as the act is absolutely unintentional. AIMPA is a fledgling organization, and we need the support, blessings, and guidance of all to move ahead in our endeavors. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Sab, can we take the poll now?
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
You're putting the poll now. We request everyone to participate. So I'm launching the poll.
All guests are invited to participate in the poll, please.
So there are 4 questions. We'll request everyone to please participate. I can see a lot of people are still polling. We'll wait for a few seconds more. Okay, we are ending the polling and I'll share the results.
Please. Thank you, Sanjeev.
So the first 2 questions.
Thank you. Yes. Well noted. Points taken.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for the sessions. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Simon, for this wonderful session, and I appreciate the help extended to AIMPA. The more deliberations are needed of this kind, and I will re-engage with you guys because we want to learn from Australia what you guys have done 30 years back, and this is how the India will progress and Indian maritime pilot will progress. I'm very sure about this fact. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up in coming week. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeff. Visual thanks to you. Thank you. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Right.
One more small thing, sir, to all the participants. I have placed the official email address of AIMPA in the chat box. For any other further questions, discussions, deliberations, please feel free to write to AIMPA on the email address. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Gajanan sir, can I end the meeting?
Bye.
Yeah, please, sir. Go ahead, end the meeting, stop recording. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.